Hello and welcome back, my friend. Hello to you if this is your first time. So today we're going to use almost a whole fence picket. I know that's blurry, but it is about 56.5 inches long. You'll probably notice there's a split at the top of the board. I'm going to mark that it's about 20 inches long. I'm going to mark that and cut it off, and then I'll use it as part of one of the projects. So in 1/2 of the split, I can get up to 3¼ inches. So I'm going to set the fence on the table saw to that width, and then I'll reap the board. On the next piece, it looks like I can get up to 2 inches wide, and that's what I'll set the fence to and make the reap cut. At this point, I want to quickly remind you that all you need is a little bit of faith and some action. Next, I'll reap the other side of the board to remove the factory edge. So I took approximately 1/4 inch off, so I'll be left with about 1 3/4 inch wide material. Next, on the miter saw, with the miter set to a 45-degree angle, we'll make 4 pieces at 3 1/4 inches long. So make the first miter cut and then flip the board over and then measure 3 1/4 inches and then make the miter cut at that spot. And then just repeat that to get 4 pieces. We're just going to assemble and glue the 4 sides. I'm using blue tape to hold the 4 boards together, and then I'll flip it over and add the glue and then just fold it up and let it dry. I use a clamp to just help squeeze the sides so they have a very good fit, a tight fit. Once that is drying, I'll measure and cut for the bottom of the pencil holder and the sticker holder. And I already have a 45-degree on the remaining piece, so I'm just going to go with that and make a 45 on the other side rather than cutting that off and losing material. Remember, try to use as much of the material as possible. For this back trim, the top piece, I'm ripping the board down to 1 3/8, but you can actually use 1 1/4 or 1 1/2 inches. And I just cut it to match the width of the box, which is 3 1/4 inches wide. Now it's time for the final assembly. I'll remove the blue tape and then assemble everything using wood glue and some brad nails. I'm using 1 1/8 inch brad nails for this, but I guess 1 1/4 inch brad nails will work just fine. So shortly I will be adding the 45 degrees to the back trim piece to match the base, which is going to add some extra character and uniqueness to the pencil holder. And I thought this was a good time to do the sanding, because once everything has been assembled, unless you do hand sanding, it will be difficult to use the power sander like I'm doing right now. At this point, I want to quickly remind you that all you need is a little bit of faith and some action. Okay, so we're done with the first one, and here's how it looks like. And you would notice the bottom. Take a look at the bottom with the mitred edges. It adds some unique character to it. So I hope you'll make that one. Now on to the next project. And for that one, we're going to use the remainder of the fence picket. So that's the remaining material that I have, and the board is now at 36.5 inches. And so we're going to make a couple miter cuts, one at 18 inches long and the other one at 10 inches long, and then we'll take the 10 inches long over to the table saw to make some rib cuts. So I'm measuring 1.5 inches from the blade to the fence, and we'll make 1.5 inch rib cuts. Make 3 pieces. One of them will be cut into two equal halves for the 2 sides, and then one for the base, and then one for the bottom front of the letter holder. And the remainder material from those rib cuts is about 3/4 inch wide, and that will be for the top front of the letter holder. Now on the miter saw, we're just going to cut one of the 1.5 inch boards into 2 at 5 inches, like I mentioned. And now it is time for assembly. It's pretty easy using wood glue and some brad nails. I'm using 1 1/8 inch brad nails for this, but I guess 1 1/4 inch brad nails will work just fine. Once everything has been assembled with the glue, I just placed a flat board on top of it and then put some weight on it to let the glue dry, which it does dry very quickly. And then I went ahead and added the brad nails. And then to hang the keys, I'm just using cup hooks there. I'm using 3 of those. So to add the mounting hardware, it's pretty straightforward. I'm measuring 1 inch from each of the sides, and then I measured 3/4 inch from the top, and that's where I positioned the mounting hardware. And then I just used my punch tool rather than pre-drilling, because it's a thin board, it's a 1/2 inch board. That's it for this one. It's pretty straightforward and easy to build. And if you do have a laser or a Cricut machine, you can optionally add a name, a family name, or personalize it how you want to. Now for the third project, we have about 8¼ inch of material left. So for this one, we're going to rip the boards down to 1/2 inch strips. But first I'm ripping off the factory edge so they'll have a smooth end to work with. And then I'll make strips of 1/2 inch width on the table saw, and then we'll use that to make the cuts on the miter saw. Next, I'll rip a piece of 1 inch wide, which will be the stem of the holder, and that will leave me with approximately 2 inches wide material for the base. Now the last few pieces, I'll just use a handsaw and cut those. It's a lot safer than doing it on the miter saw. And here are all the pieces that we need for the cube. It's not an equal sided cube, but it works for the purpose that we need it for. We just need a cube, and so I'm just going to put those pieces together. Start with the 2 inch pieces glued to 1.5 inch pieces in between, and then I'll use the remainder of the 1.5 inches to connect those two sides together. And I used 1 inch pin nails to fasten them together, just so I don't have to wait for the glue to dry. This can be done with just the glue, and in my case I'm using the quick and thick glue that dries pretty fast, but I wanted it to go even faster, so I used the pin nails. Next, I'm just going to sand all the sides of it on the belt sander. We can just use the orbital sander to do this, but the belt sander makes it go quicker. And then I'm going to flatten one of the corners, actually 2 of the corners, as you will see me do shortly. So those on the left there are what I have left as the materials after all 3 projects. Now for the final assembly, I'm going to use what's left of the board, which is about 2 inches wide, and the 1 inch that I ripped, and then there's a 1¼ inch that I'll use for the top. And we're going to put that together using wood glue and some brad nails. So for the floating mechanism, I'll need to use magnets, and I'm going to use a really small magnets, 3/8 inch diameter magnets. And so I just drilled using a Forstner bit on the top piece, and then I did the same thing on one of the flat ends of the cube, where I'll fasten the magnet as well. For the final part of the assembly, you will need some patience and a little bit of faith to get this done, because it takes some finessing to get it to the right tension, but it is doable. It's not hard to do. It just takes some steady hands and just a little patience. At least that was my experience, because I was trying to get this done as quickly as possible. Now there's a string that holds the cube up in the upright position, and that's really the tricky part. And I just drill a hole that I'll use as the channel for the cord to go through, and then getting the cord to be the right height is a tricky part. You just need some patience and some tinkering with, and eventually you'll be able to get the right tension to keep the piece suspending and being pulled by the magnet on both sides, as you'll see shortly. And here's a quick close-up of the gap that we'll like to achieve once it's done. Now I'm measuring the distance of the neck to where the magnet at the top is, and then I'll use that same measurement to drill a hole for where the cord will go through to make sure the cube is floating straight up. And after some tinkering, I was able to get it to where I wanted it to be. And here's the final look of it. You should be able to spin the cube with just a little bit of force, and it should stay in that position the whole time whilst it's spinning. And as you can probably tell, it is spinning in real time. And here's another look or another angle of it. Well, that is it for this one. I hope you're inspired to make one or all three of these. Whichever one you make, you have my best wishes. And until the next video, I hope you will have a tangible experience of God's love today. Take care, and God bless you, my friend.